Welcome back to Taboo Topics Tuesday, the podcast where we delve into issues people with disabilities face in an attempt to enhance community understanding. In today's episode, we'll discuss ableism, ableist language, and better suited terminology. Joining me are my co-hosts, Emma, Leah, and Michaela. So language was one of the more popular topics chosen by our community. I'm very happy to see that because language is such a taboo topic that contributes to the stigma and ableism.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to research this topic because I too was interested in learning more about language. So what's the definition of ableism for our viewers and listeners who are unfamiliar with this topic?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm gonna speak on behalf of myself and probably some of our viewers, but I don't exactly know what it means or what it entails.
So essentially, ableism values those who aren't disabled, and ableism believes that those with disabilities are inferior, even to the extent of basically thinking that they're quote-unquote not normal.
Oh, that's discrimination.
Absolutely.
So what happens when someone is disabled? Is there anything to help support them?
There are some accommodations that exist to help make the environment more accessible for those who have disabilities.
An accommodation could be like a ramp for people who use wheelchairs or extra time when writing on tests and exams.
Yeah, exactly. And even though there are accommodations, there's still some barriers that people with disabilities face, and barriers can make it difficult for any person with a disability to achieve or obtain certain things. And these barriers can be like transportation issues, stigma, limited employment opportunities, inaccessible learning environments. It's so many. And all of these really contribute to unfair outcomes. So this next discussion includes topics related to disability, including ableist language. Please be advised that this content may be distressing or triggering for some viewers, so please take care of yourselves in deciding whether to continue. And before we get started on this next segment, I'd like to make a disclaimer that the R word is a form of hate speech that stands for retard, retarded, or other offensive words ending in tard. And while mental retardation was originally introduced as a medical term in 1961 for people with intellectual disabilities, in the decades since then, the R word has become an insult and is used all too commonly in everyday language. So for the purpose of this episode, we will use it just at the beginning where we define what the R word means, but moving forward, I will refer to it as the R word. Now that we have the basics down and some definitions, we can discuss the terminology. So there's lots out there that are peppered into daily conversations that we might not exactly term as offensive, or might not even know that these words are not ideal.
I was reading into it a bit and I saw that the word insane isn't exactly appropriate either. I didn't know that.
What other words should we be aware of?
Some common words that some people might use to describe people with disabilities include words such as like disabled person, caretaker, epileptic, handicapped, and like I mentioned earlier, the R word often is used too.
So what other terms should we use instead?
Those are all very good questions, guys. Thanks for your participation. These terms, the terms that we should use instead should be person born with a disability or person with epilepsy. We should use accessible, for example, rather than handicapped when referring to parking spaces, for example, or accessible bathroom stalls.
And what about identity first versus person first?
I think asking the person is the best source. It depends on what the person prefers, and this is to answer your question, Leah, about person or identity first. This totally depends on the person because some prefer not to be defined by their disability and prefer the person first option. Some feel that their disability is a part of who they are and how they define themselves. It's something they are proud to make their identity, so they prefer identity first.
There's plenty of resources online that will give more respectful and culturally sensitive words if you're looking to educate yourselves.
And if you want to learn to be more inclusive, there's no harm in asking the person. I think they'd probably appreciate it more than you just assuming.
And before we end off this episode, here are some resources if you're interested in learning more. These sites can give you more information about words that are acceptable and words that you should be using instead. So examples being like the American Psychological Association is a good resource, the National Center on Disability and Journalism, and the Disability Language Style Guide by the University of Washington. And that concludes the end of the language episode of Taboo Topics. We have episodes on invisible disabilities, disabilities in the media, and providing assistance to someone with a disability if you'd like to check those out as well.
See you guys next time.